Hi, this is Megan and Allison, and we're going to talk about our project, Metacognitive Behavior Tracking. So at the end of last quarter, we ended up knowing that we wanted to make users aware of their learning behaviors, but we didn't really know how. We had some design arguments that we made that weren't really separated from our system arguments and our interface arguments, um, and we really didn't know where to start. Uh, I guess it's sort of like tackling this problem of how can we get students to be better at learning through tracking their metacognitive processes. So our motivation for this project is that we want students to be able to learn better through tracking their metacognitive processes. A research question that we wanted to identify this quarter, after slicing down our project a lot, is to see if students are able to identify where they got off track after showing them their study data or like studying data within a study session. And we chose to slice down because we've decided that the first part of being able to think metacognitively is to be aware of what what you're doing when you study. And then this is what we decided our research question should be this quarter. Based on our need finding results from last quarter, we realized that students don't actually know exactly what they're doing in a study session. They might have a general understanding of it, but it's really hard for them to put into context like exactly what they're doing. And sometimes what they remember from their study sessions might not actually be what they're doing. So we updated our design arguments, and the one that we came up with is that the outcome is that we want students to become aware of their learning behaviors and their processes, and then we can show that by the students having the ability to identify points where they got off track during their learning session. And the obstacle that we have to that is that students don't actually have data about their learning behaviors, nor do they have any information about their learning process. And by process, we mean that the sequence of things that they're doing during a learning session. So students can't really know what they're doing if they don't have any data to back that up. The characteristics that we came up with to overcome the obstacles is that we want a way to show users how exactly they're spending their time during their learning sessions in the context of the process during their learning activities. So basically, for example, if a user was studying between the hours of 5 and 6:30, we kind of want them to know that like, oh, maybe at 5:25 they took a break and went on Facebook. At 6:20 they also took a break and went on Facebook, and what implications those have. And we think that it's going to work because we think that showing users kind of like this story of how they're spending their time during a study session would actually help them put context to their study behavior, so it could kind of like jot their memories so they can understand like what they're doing specifically at what time, and sort of give them an understanding of like where they got off track, and they'll have that data so they can see like maybe what are the triggers that led to them going off track, and if they're able to refocus and come back to studying after. And then we're able to test this part of our design arguments during our status update in Sprint 4, where we actually tested both our design arguments and our interface arguments. So first we wanted to find out if like a list, sort of like a timeline interface, is a viable design to have students understand their data. And the second thing we wanted to learn is, are students actually able to identify where they went off track given their web browsing data during a study session? So we asked students to look at their Chrome history data, which is shown in like a list, a timeline, and then we went and asked for them to see if they were able to identify specific points where they got off track. And after the study, most students were able to understand the timeline interface and were able to pick out like parts where they got off track. At the end of the activity, we've actually learned that uh, giving students this timeline, this data actually does help them, because a lot of them did say that they, based on this data, they would want to change their study behaviors, and also that they were more aware of what they were doing during that particular study session.
Alright, so I'm going to do a demo of our iOS app here. So I'm going to run the app, make sure our location is simulating the one we want it to. And here we are. So what this is going to do is it's tracking the user's location, and we've tagged a geofence around Mud Library. So when the user enters the library, they're going to get a notification that they've entered the region and a timer is starting for their study session. The idea behind using this app was that it's really convenient for the user to have an iOS app. It's great for location tracking, and it's pretty easy. So here we go. We've got the notification that we've entered the library and a study session is starting. So we've simulated the user to stay in the library for a few minutes, and then once the user exits, they're going to get a notification that they've exited, and from here the idea is that we're going to link it to our Chrome extension, and which will parse the data that we've collected while they were in the library from their browser and parse that and display it to the user in the app so that it's really convenient, really easy to look at, so they don't have to spend extra time in the library trying to analyze their data and look at, or not necessarily analyze it, but looking at how they've spent their time. So I'm going to show our web tracking extension that we have here. So now that this demo is over, so after this, what happens is the user leaves, they get a notification, and they get a little summary here of what they did. So we're going to close that out. Here we go. Here we go. All right, so here is our little extension. We've got, it's called Page Timer, which helps users track how long they've been on their page. So we're going to go ahead and enable that right now. And then I'm going to open up a new tab here, and then this is our extension right here that you can see. It's starting to track that we've been on this new tab for 6, 7, 8 seconds, and it's going to keep timing like that. And then if we open a new tab, so you can see it here, we only have one tab here with the tab ID of 385, and so then if we open a new tab, it knows that we've opened a new tab. Say we go to Google. Here we go. And, oops, not Google Drive, just regular Google. There we go. And it knows that I've gone to Google Drive and Google and how long I've spent on each of those pages. So it tracks across tabs. And if I go to a new tab here and go to like images of dogs or something, here we go, we've got that. So this also shows that we're in a new tab with a new tab ID. So that's how that works, is that's tracking the user's activity. Now if we leave it for 15 seconds, say we're looking at this picture of a dog for too long. Right now we have it set for 15 seconds, but we're obviously going to have longer if the user walks away from their computer or if they're inactive for a while. We want to fill in those gaps. So what we're going to do is let this sit for 15 seconds, and then so that Chrome will identify that the user has been idle. And then once the user's been idle, once they come back to their computer, once they look at their computer again, say they went for a bathroom break and they come back, once they move that mouse, it's going to open up a new page that's going to ask them what they were doing. And it's just going to be some quick check boxes. We'll see in a minute. And the idea is that it takes just a few quick seconds to check off what they were doing, or maybe if they were doing something a little different, they can input it to fill in those gaps of tracking, so we know what they were doing. Because say if we can only track what's on their computer, we don't know what they were doing when they were not on their computer. Say they were reading, say they were working off of their computer, we wouldn't be able to track that. So this is how we're doing that, is tracking those periods of inactivity. So here we go. If I move it here, it says, welcome back. What were you doing? Let's say I went to the bathroom and was checking my phone. I can just click those here, submit it, boom, and that gets all taken into our CSV, which we can download here. And the CSV is going to have all of the data that we want for each tab, as well as those inputs of checkboxes of periods of inactivity. So that's it for our tech demo, but I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the obstacles that we had throughout this. So let me pull up that. All right. So some of the obstacles that we've had, initially we had, the obstacle that we had before this even was when we were working on our app at the beginning of the quarter was learning Swift and learning how to do the location tracking on the iPhone and things like that. But But after that, we also had some issues of tracking across the tabs. How do we get all that data to flow into each other, because users can have many tabs open at the same time. Another thing we talked about that we struggled with was how do we not interrupt the flow of a study session. Something we experimented with was pushing notifications as soon as the computer detected that the user was idle, with the idea that, say they're on their phone and it gives them a notification, it's like, hey, what are you doing? That they would get back on their computer and work. But say they're reading or doing something that's productive but not on their computer, and the notification interrupted it. And we know that notifications are really disruptive based on evidence from our status update. People reported being really distracted as soon as they got, oh, here we go, I was inactive for 15 seconds. But this is what they were really distracted by notifications, as I was just now. And so what if they're doing something productive? So the idea is that once they come back onto their computer, then it will open that page and they can input what they were doing. And so that so it doesn't break their flow of studying. Another thing is that we used to have like a dialog box that the user could type in what they were doing, but we switched the checkbox so that it was less invasive, and we only open this pop-up will only open if the user clicks on it themselves. So there's nothing kind of popping or flashing at them, so it doesn't break that flow that they've hopefully developed in their study session. And then as far as like downloading this data that we have in the CSV, once we download it, we started with a simple Python parser that showed the percentage of time that was spent on social media, but that didn't actually tell the users what they wanted to know. Showing the percentage doesn't give them any context for what they were doing before or after they were distracted. So it turns out that, say, like a pie chart, or so I have this other web time tracker over here that's a pie chart, but that doesn't tell you a lot. It doesn't tell you what you were doing before or after. You got distracted. It doesn't tell you what some triggers were to get distracted. It doesn't tell you how long it took you to kind of get back on track, and it doesn't give you that sequence of events that's really valuable for being able to pinpoint where you got off track. So we decided on a timeline feature, and we decided, as based on evidence from our status update, that when we had people, when we asked them to draw a representation of their Chrome history, if they look through their Chrome history, what would they see? And a lot of them 10 out of the 12 people drew a timeline, and all of them were able to identify points where they got off track, points where they were, a few people had examples that they got a text notification, they started texting. A few people noticed that at a certain point they got on Facebook and then they couldn't get back on track for the rest of their study session. That's information that's really valuable for the user and for us as well, for tracking those habits and helping users become more aware of them. So from some of the limitations of this, that we can only capture so much context. What if it's noisy where they're, what if they're not feeling well, what if they're more focused sitting with some friends than with others, and those are some things that we can't track right now. But aside from that, what we're planning to do next is work on parsing that CSV in the iOS app and display it on the interface. Hopefully they'll be able to, and make it very user-friendly, easy to download, simple to use, so that hopefully when the user is leaving, they can airdrop that file to them, and have it parsed in their app and kind of look at it maybe on the way out on their walk home, so they're not spending extra time in the library that they don't necessarily want to be spending. And we're hopefully going to be running a study next quarter, which is really exciting, having people use our app and getting feedback and seeing what they're doing. Some future questions that we probably want to look at would be tracking across sessions. How do we compare between sessions? Do users study better in one location than another? Do you study better? Is there an optimal time? Is 2 hours more productive than 3 hours? Things like that we want to maybe look at. And from here, we want to go back into that metacognition and see where we can prompt users to reflect on their habits and strategies, so that we can help them develop those metacognitive skills and scaffold steps to help them improve, which is kind of the overall goal of our project, is to help learners learn how to learn better. So that's it. So thank you for watching. Oh, what was I doing? Other.